I think, 2 or 3 big things that are going to happen over the next 20 or 30 years, which are going to mean, even though we've got the highest taxes ever at the moment, I think they may well go up further. One is the population is getting older. And there'll be something like a tripling in the fraction of people who are over the age of 80 and a big increase in the number of people over age 65. And that's expensive because those are the people who use the health service a lot. And, of course, they get paid pensions. Health service is much bigger, actually, than pensions, but both of those and social care. So all of those things. And, of course, on average, they pay less tax than people who are in work. So all of those things will have an upward pressure on spending and, therefore, on tax. Second thing, of course, is climate change. And we're committed, quite rightly, to get to net zero by 2050. That's a big, that's a big issue to get to net zero by 2050. We're all going to have to replace our gas boilers in our houses, for example. That's expensive. And that's not the only thing by any means. That's an extra, let's say, 20 billion a year of government spending, as well as a lot of private spending. And over the last, so that's 2 things. And over the last decade, as I say, we've had record cuts in spending on social care, on local government spending on the police, on spending on the justice system. All of those things have had really big cuts. And at most, I can't see more cuts coming there. And you can see the pressures everywhere for more spending. We've had to stop sending people to prison because they're full. We've had strikes by barristers because legal aid is so poor. We're spending no more per pupil in schools than we were 15 years ago. First time that's ever happened. So the pressures everywhere are up. And the bit of public spending, which until 10 years ago, we could always squeeze, which is defence. Well, the government at least has promised to raise that for the first time, in generations. And you can see why with what's going on in Ukraine and the problems in the Middle East and all those sorts of things. So put all of those things together, then it seems to me unless we're willing to say, look, we're going to really ration the NHS even more than we are, or we're going to means test access to the NHS, or we're going to stop providing free school post-16. So all of the pressures seem to me to be upward.
Yeah, and to counter that then, as an individual, as I go about my day, it feels like I get taxed on absolutely everything, bar breathing, right? And
that will come.
Yeah. Penny per breath. So let's look at the roads as an example. I pay road tax, and then the roads are just a mess. There's potholes everywhere, and I know it's a simple example, but it just seems like a lot of money goes into the system, and nothing is right. Is there waste? Are they just burning money, or?
Well, there's certainly some waste. I mean, interesting what you say about road tax. Of course, petrol duty has been coming down year on year on year on year for the last 13 years. And as we move to electric cars, then petrol duty will go altogether. And that's more than 30 billion quid the government's just going to lose. So that's sort of by the by. But, it's really hard in the whole public sphere to say how much waste is there. We've all seen that things could be more efficient. I mean, you go to, there's lots of inefficiencies in the NHS, partly because they haven't invested in decent computer systems and decent buildings and decent equipment over a long time. And that partly reflects the fact it always seems to be in an emergency. So the money for the long-term stuff that might save money goes into, the day-to-day stuff that just keeps you alive. As you're saying, in the short run. Yeah. I mean, there has been waste in bits. I mean, so local government, for example, has had huge cuts after 2010, and I say this quote in the book. I mean, in about 2011 or 2012, I was talking to a chief executive at one of big local authorities, and he said to me, before 2010, quotes, we were pissing money against the wall, unquote. So there were clearly, in a sense, was too much money sloshing around at that point. But they've cut like £1 in 5 of their spending over the last 15 years. It's pretty hard to think that there's a lot of waste in there, or at least things they could easily change. But right across the system, there are ways that this could be done better. It's really, really hard sitting in Whitehall to then sort of wave a wand or make a law which makes these things more efficient. That's really tough.
So on that inefficiencies point, are there any areas that you can see that are obvious or quick wins that we could change?
There's nothing big. There's nothing of a scale which would really help us sort out the kinds of problems that we're talking about. There have been mistakes for sure. I mean, part of the reason that the NHS doesn't work very well at the moment is we were not investing beforehand in the kinds of equipment and buildings and so on which would make it work better at the moment, and indeed in training the staff. And we know that we need better management in the NHS. We know we need better IT infrastructure and so on, but that's actually going to cost money up front. If I look right across the public sector, is there a sort of £10 billion budget where I can see, well, we just don't need that, it's obvious? Well, no, not really.
Politics. Over the last few years, just get rid of all of them. Let you run the country. You and T. Hash it out. Just hash it out.
Chancellor of the Exchequer over here.
Yeah, you can be my chancellor.
Good God. We covered so much in this interview with Paul Johnson, Director of the Institute of Fiscal Studies. Click here if you want to watch the whole thing.